Hi, this is Russ Squire from BizVisor, and we are going to talk about the 10 steps or the 10-step process for selling a business. These are 10 steps that are repeatable and are used in the sale of any type of business entity. So let's move along to talking about the 10 steps. First, there's an initial meeting with a business broker. Step 2, information gathered about you, the seller. And then also about the business itself. Step 3, valuation and determining a price. Step 4 would be signing the listing agreement with us as the business broker. Step 5, advertise the business in a confidential manner. Step number 6, conduct all business meetings with potential buyers. Step number 7, managing negotiations that come about as a result of due diligence. Step 8 is managing the due diligence process itself. Step number 9 would be to get disclosures signed by the buyer and the seller. And then finally, step 10, manage the closing process. So we'll talk a little bit here about each one of these items in a little greater detail. So let's go ahead and move on with it. Step 1, the initial meeting with us. You want a trusted advisor that understands asset valuation, negotiation, finance, financial statements, and their restatement. Personally, I have degrees in finance. I've worked and studied at the Wharton School of Business. I've bought and sold multiple businesses, sold a business to a publicly traded company, have bought businesses for clients. So you want somebody that has that type of experience and that type of background. Number 2, you want to be comfortable with our background, education, skills, knowledge, and the ability to represent you. I think that's important. There are a lot of people out there selling businesses, many of them not qualified to do so. There are a lot of realtors that don't have the finance background and the training to do the financial statements and their restatement. Maybe they aren't trained in asset valuation. So there's a lot of complexity to this business. The average small business will be on the market for about 9 months, assuming that it's priced correctly. Now, most aren't. And that means it can take even longer. There are a lot of people out there that try and attempt to sell their own businesses and just do not know how to appropriately price those businesses, and most of them think the businesses are worth more than they are. A lot of times we're going to see those people, but it may be a year or so before they finally wake up to the fact that they actually haven't correctly evaluated the business. And at the end of the day, everybody who's buying a business is going to go through the same process. These are sophisticated buyers. Nobody's going to overpay. It's not that type of business. It's a business where you may as well assume from the beginning that nobody's going to come along and offer you the gold ring if it doesn't exist in the ability for that business to produce a significant amount of cash flow. Our website is a serious educational tool for our clients, but we're always here to work with you personally every step of the way. And I want to make that clear because there are a lot of questions that come up along the way. And even though we've got videos like this on our website, there are always going to be questions. Step number 2, information about you and the business. Now we're going to need 3 years of tax returns plus a profit and loss and balance sheet for the current year to date. So we've got to be able to show changes from year to year, both in the profit and loss statement or the P&L and also in the balance sheet. And anybody looking at a business is going to want to see those things. They're going to want to see how the inventory is managed. They're going to want to see trends. So it's important to understand that that information has to be gathered on the front end. We're going to need your information as the customer. We're going to need an inventory list and a dollar value. And that dollar value has to be at replacement cost. So, maybe you've got a truck and the truck is 5 years old and, Kelley Blue Book says trucks with similar mileage are worth, 8 to 10,000. So we're going to have to pick a value, and we're going to have to be able to somehow justify that value for that equipment. you can leave that all up to the buyer, but at the end of the day, it's a good idea to come up with, some type of valuation, because buyers have to go out and obtain financing. And in obtaining financing, they're going to have to be able to show, assets, because banks only lend money against assets. They don't lend money against blue sky or goodwill of the business. So equipment list and a dollar value, and this is at a different valuation, at market value. Inventory, maybe you've got, take a lumber yard. They've got, bunks of 2x4s, bunks of 2x6s. That inventory has to be valued at its replacement cost. But, equipment like, say, for instance, a vehicle, as we discussed earlier, has to be done at market value. What is the current market value of that piece of equipment? Not its original purchase price, not its depreciated value as it sits on your balance sheet, but the actual market value based upon, numbers of hours of operation and condition. We need to know the reason for the sale. If you're retiring, great, but that's an important aspect, and every seller is every buyer is going to ask about that. What type of entity you have? Are you an LLC? Are you a sub S corp? Are you a C corporation? Are you a partnership? We need to know the type of entity. That has tax implications. We need to know your hours of operation. Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, or whatever those hours of operation are when customers can reach you. We need to know how long you've been in the business. If you haven't been in the business 3 to 5 years, chances are your business isn't saleable. Now, I don't mean to scare anybody away, but the bottom line is, any bank that's going to look at lending, or any institution, SBA, whatever it may be, that's going to look at lending dollars to a potential buyer, is going to want to see some operating history. So 3 to 5 years, at a bare bones would be my recommendation. Who are your main competitors in the marketplace, and how many of them are there? Any buyer is going to want to see what the barriers to entry are. If the barriers to entry are too low and there are too many competitors, maybe there's not enough work to go around, or if you're in a boom time, yeah, maybe there's enough work now, but what's it going to be like when you go into a recessionary cycle in the economy? So those are risks that every buyer is going to want to assess. What is your competitive rank in the marketplace? Maybe there's 40 concrete firms in the marketplace, but are you number 1, number 2, number 3? Where do you rank? And how loyal are your customers? Those are all very important factors. What are the strengths and weaknesses of your company? Maybe you're really good at doing the work, but maybe you're really weak at marketing and gaining new work. Maybe you don't have anybody who's an outside salesperson. Maybe you don't have a good website. There can be a whole list of things, but you need to really sit down and be honest about the strengths your business has and the weaknesses your business has, because any buyer is going to ask those questions. Lease information. What kind of lease do you have on your building or your location? Maybe you own the location. Maybe the location is also for sale. So that would be a real estate transaction together with the business. And that's all fine, but that information needs to come out in initial meetings so that we have a good methodology for valuation of the business. And just other vital information. So step 2 is fairly detailed. We need to have a at-length meeting that brings to the forefront a lot of this information and where that information can be had. So on to step number 3, valuation and determining a price. So this is going to take a couple weeks. This doesn't happen overnight, but all business valuations are determined by 3 factors. The cash flow, and like I said before, the cash flow of the business, not to be confused with the net profit. You got to back out any kind of expense items that accrue to the owner, owner's salary, owner's contribution for a vehicle, owner's contribution for retirement, all those kinds of aspects. Need to look at the business assets, the buildings and equipment. What are they worth? And then, what level of goodwill really does exist in the business? We'll talk about that a little more at length later. Number 1, cash flow. tax returns and profit and loss don't show true cash flow. Many expense items accrue benefit to the owner and need to be restated. Business assets, the value of assets like equipment has nothing to do with its depreciated value. Only through appraisal can these items be reasonably valued. Or, in the case of vehicles, you could be using a tool like Kelley Blue Book, to look at an average range of prices that might be reasonable given the mileage and other factors. And I'm sure many of you have used those tools before. Goodwill. Unless you're a national brand like Coca-Cola or McDonald's, your goodwill is only good to the extent that your customer base has a loyalty to new ownership. And this is going to vary by the type of business. I'll give you an example. I had a friend that sold a sandwich shop, and the sandwich shop had been in town for, 30 some odd years, almost 40. High customer base near the university, always did well. Hey, no worries whatsoever there. The goodwill, it's embedded. So in that case, goodwill could be a higher percentage of selling price. Now you're talking about, say, for instance, a small company in the building industry has a list of maybe 15 or 20 customers, and just a few of those customers comprise a large share of their business. There may not be that loyalty. And so goodwill has to be significantly discounted in that type of an event, as opposed to something that, people aren't going to think about going out and buying a sandwich, but yeah, they are going to think about spending, $40, $50, $75,000 on concrete work or whatever the case may be. So it's a different animal altogether, goodwill, based upon number of customers and, of course, how often do people use it in their day-to-day lives. In other words, you got to eat every day, but you don't have to lay down $75,000 worth of concrete every day. So it's a different animal. Step 4, signing the listing agreement. So we arrive at a range of prices we feel the business can justify based upon cash flow, asset, and market conditions. And that would mean whether we're in a growth period, high growth period, moderating economy, or a downward economy. And the cash flow multipliers will vary by industry. Some businesses are only worth 1.5 to 2 times annual cash flow. Some are worth 3 and 4 times annual cash flow, but it's going to vary by industry. And there are places we get reports of recent sales of businesses in your industry, so we know exactly what those multipliers are and what the final price paid was. Once a price is agreed upon, we set the length of the listing, generally for a year, and that BizVisor will have exclusive right to sell for that period of time. Businesses are going to take up to 9 months, like we said earlier, so it's important to have that time. Once the agreement is signed, we put in place a marketing plan and we develop a memorandum. A memorandum would be a document containing all the vital information about the business, probably 15 to 20 pages in length. Something that's either bound or done in a PDF format that we can deliver directly to potential buyers. Step number 5, we have to advertise the business, and confidentially. This is extremely important. Businesses can't be named, nor locations given. This isn't real estate, so there are a lot of consequences that can occur as a result of a lack of confidentiality in a business transaction. Vendors can get nervous, key clients can get nervous, employees can leave, you name it, it can happen. So it's very, very important that any buyer has signed a confidentiality and non-disclosure prior to any information being given. All advertising is copywritten in a generic format to conceal the company's identity so that adverse impacts to the business, like we discussed just a second ago, are avoided. Local and national networks of buyers that are looking for similar businesses are made aware of the opportunity. And most of the advertising is online because 90% business and real estate buyers begin their searches online. So, if you're going down the traditional, advertising road of newspaper ads, magazine ads, for the most part, you're wasting your time, wasting money. You may as well really elevate the profile of the business as much as possible online. And that's what we do. Step number 6, distribute material and conduct all meetings with potential buyers. Advertising, showing, screening prospects, and a lot of the real work begins once the listing agreement is signed. BizVisor collects confidentiality agreements, performs showings, gets financial data to all interested parties that have signed the non-disclosure agreement, or NDA as we call it. We take care of negotiations and handle the process until a purchase agreement is fully executed. And that's important because there's a lot of negotiation that goes on before that document becomes finalized. We'll talk about that a little bit more also later. This process can involve many prospects and is very time consuming, so it allows you, the owner, to continue operating the business. Trying to sell a business and run a business is, I don't know how people do it. And most of them don't do it very well. So that's one of the reasons business brokerage exists. Step number 7, manage all the negotiations. Many items of a purchase agreement will be negotiated. Financing, how long a time frame they have to obtain financing and at what terms. Appraisals for equipment, appraisals for real estate. The time frame that will be allowed, what the closing dates will be, asset prices, leases, and just a whole host of other points. So this is a very time-consuming part of the process, and it requires tax, transactional, real estate, finance, and other specific types of knowledge. Negotiations are likely to occur with buyers, their agents, lenders, possibly employees, non-compete agreements, and a host of other factors. So it's complicated and it is detailed. Step number 8 is to manage the due diligence process, and this is really where the rubber meets the road. I mean, this is the single most complex and time-consuming part of the entire process. You can think of due diligence, and as we wrote here, is sort of a verification on steroids. It's also what gives the buyer their negotiating leverage. They conduct their due diligence, and maybe you said the equipment was worth $250,000. It turns out that the appraisal comes back at only $175,000. Okay, well, it's like Apollo 13, Houston, we got a problem. So we have to determine if that appraisal is legitimate and whether or not we're going to have to lower the price in order to get the transaction to move forward. Verification of all the financial data, equipment appraisals, real estate appraisals, gathering a customer list so they can assess the risk that exists and what percentage of customers comprise what percentage of your business, evaluating key employees and their loyalty, and a long list of tasks. So there's a lot that goes on in due diligence. Making certain that potential buyers are staying on track with their due diligence and their due diligence timeframes. Evaluating closing costs and negotiating room on price of equipment or real estate, and that's all going to be based on appraisal. Like I said, if the appraisals come back low, not good. If they come back on target, great. If they come back above, hey, maybe we didn't ask enough. And any one of those 3 scenarios can occur, but our job is to try and renegotiate based upon actual valuations we obtain. So step number 9, get disclosures signed by the buyer and the seller. Confidentiality, non-compete agreements, the disclosures pertaining to real estate, and there are several of those, and equipment will need to be signed prior to closing. Disclosures can vary by transaction, especially if there is a patented or proprietary technology that's being transferred. Franchises may have limitations on geography. Disclosures are going to vary by the type of industry and the assets being purchased. So a lot going on there as well. Step 10, managing the closing process. This would involve ensuring that all the seller contingencies are removed, for appraisals, financing, other items, and then get removed by the release dates. Otherwise, the contract itself for purchase is going to be invalidated. Drafting any necessary amendments for price or term changes that may occur during due diligence. We discussed that earlier, so I won't dwell on it. Making sure the closing company has all the necessary documents to close. I can't tell you, I mean, I've seen closings that went sideways in the wind because documents didn't show up or weren't completed. You want to make sure that the financing and all sources of cash to close are in place and have the closing date and wire transfer information for the title and escrow company that will perform the closing. So a lot of stuff going on there. So that you know, that's this 10-step process, but that's what, you know, business brokers do when they work for a seller. And you know, as you can see, it's fairly complex. There's a lot going on. And if you'd like an evaluation of your business, then just simply call us. You can call me. My name is Russ Squire at BizVisor. Telephone number is 406-425-2742. You can schedule an appointment to sit down and discuss your selling goals, your reasons, your financials, and come prepared to answer questions regarding the business. Allow 1 to 2 weeks for evaluation and analysis, and then sign a listing agreement, and we will get your property sold. So, thanks for listening, and